Hello there, Andrew Colsky with Therapy BTS, Therapy Behind the Scenes. And today we're going to be talking sleep. We've got Carrissa Hankins, who is a nurse practitioner working with sleep with wonderful experience. And she's got a real treat for us today because we're going to talk about sleep apnea. But Carrissa, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Andrew. So I'm Carrissa Hankins. I am a nurse practitioner. I graduated from NP school in 2009, and in 2011, I started working in a sleep medicine clinic. And I would like to say that it was my grand plan to do that all along, but really it wasn't because sleep found me. I did not find it. It's that kind of thing that just, it just clicks, right?
Mhm.
So I did the sleep clinic for just under 9 years. And then in 2019, I switched over to pulmonology, which was just in time for COVID.
Wonderful.
Um, and so I've been out of the clinic for a little over a year at this point,
Mhm.
and it's been a wild ride for sure,
Great.
for sure.
Well, I appreciate the intro and I love the fact that you said sleep found you, so I have to follow up on that. What does that mean?
Well, I went through nurse practitioner school, and there's a thing about most nurses, or at least nursing students. We are all very type A. We can get a 98 on a test and walk out of that exam room and go, "Oh, I failed. Ah. And that's just kind of the way most of us are. I'm not going to speak for all of us, but a lot of us, that's kind of how we are. And so when you first graduate nurse practitioner school, you're like, I know all this book stuff, but I don't know the street stuff. And you kind of feel like, even though you've done all this school and you've had all this experience between nursing, like actual the nursing stuff you already had to do to get in the program in the first place, and then the stuff to, be able to sit for your boards and all that, you still feel like you know absolutely nothing. So even from like the most simplest things, you know a lot, but you don't feel like you know a lot. So sleep found me. I had the opportunity and the privilege of working with a fantastic board certified sleep and pulmonary physician, and he was, and I think he still is, a joy to work with. But like, I got a full onboarding, here's these textbooks and all these papers to read. And so he made sure that I really understood and felt confident in what I was doing. And it still took about a year, really, to feel like I knew what I was doing, even if I looked like I knew what I was doing already. But just that confidence piece, because sometimes you're just not quite sure.
Mhm.
And for me, it just clicked. For some people, it's cardiology. For some people, it's primary care. But for me, it's sleep. And so now everywhere I look, I'm like, haha, sleep, 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 sleep. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. I hear what you're saying, and I can share that, for me, working with mental health clients, I never really thought about sleep. I'm thinking about depression, anxiety, OCD, whatever. And as I started getting interested in sleep and started to incorporate some knowledge for myself, I started to realize how sleep is very relevant and impacts mental health in many different ways. And it's something that in the mental health training field, we don't talk about sleep. We don't really get into that, but it's absolutely intertwined. And so, speaking with experts like yourself, I'm really excited about it because I get to learn all the sort of inside stories about this. So, that's what I'm looking forward to. So,
Well, and I'm super excited because, you know, in nursing school, we didn't get a whole lot on sleep either. We got in neither version of nursing school, not the RN that I did or the master's program that I did. We did not get a whole lot on sleep. We had the sleep medicine and pharmacology. And back in the day, it was, if you're going to do one of the medications that was advertised for insomnia, you're only supposed to do it for 7 to 14 days. And I thought, what about the rest of the nights? Like, and so this stuff that we're talking about today, a lot of it's not taught in school, in any school. It's just
mhm.
not. So I really do appreciate the opportunity to come and talk. about this.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love it. So let me ask you this. So you're working in a sleep clinic. Can you share with the audience what are the different types of roles that people would have in a sleep clinic? And just briefly, what does each one do so that we can get a picture of what goes on in there?
Sure. So there's clinic and there's lab. Lab is the nighttime piece. Usually there are some daytime folks, at least in the organization that I was part of. And so you at the very first level, we have our administrative folks, the front office staff, the people who work on the insurance prior authorizations and do your appointment reminders and that sort of thing.
Mhm,
In the sleep lab would have our clinical coordinator. So that was the person who made sure that we had all of our supplies, that our software was up to date. If there was anything that was not going right, it would be for the clinical coordinator to manage. Then we have our sleep technicians. These are we usually a lot of times they're respiratory therapists that also have the polysomnography technician add on to it.
mhm,
Some people they just do the polysomnography stuff, and so polysomnography is the long word for sleep study. And that's where you, in the lab at least, you get wired. We call it wired for sound. So sensors from your scalp to your shins, and so the sleep technician gets those on the person who's going to be tested, and and then they go in the control room and they just kind of keep an eye on what's going on with the person. And as
mhm,
the night goes through, if the person is not breathing, they'll mark that. And we don't mean not breathing for, super long periods of time, but anywhere from 10 seconds up to 3 minutes would be a period of time where somebody would not be breathing.
mhm.
Don't have many on the over 2 minutes side of things, but it always kind of makes your eyebrows curl a little bit. Um, so sleep technicians, so they help to score the sleep studies as the data is coming through, and then in the morning after. We had our sleep physician, a board certified sleep physician. Only a sleep physician in the current climate of things here in the United States, only a sleep physician can provide the physician interpretation for a sleep study. So
Mhm.
even though I can look at whatever's been scored and go, yep, that looks like sleep apnea, I can't put my name on it because I did not go to doctor school,
Right, right,
and all of the stuff that goes with that. So that is the sleep clinic side. Our
right.
sleep physician he was always available or had someone available if there was a concern that came up overnight. Whether it was somebody's having a very strange heart rhythm that we are concerned about, or hey, this is what's happening with some therapy. We're trying to fix the breathing and it's not quite working out. What do we do here?
Mhm.
So he would be the guy for that kind of troubleshooting stuff. So he
Let me
usually would get in. Sorry, go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
I wanted to stop you and ask one question before we got too far past it, just for clarification.
Hmm.
When you were talking about the big, wonderful word polysomnography, and you said we put the sensors and all the things on the body, just for clarification, are there any needles?
There are no needles. There are no needles. There's goopy paste sometimes on the head, is what they'll use to put the stickers on the head. And then there's some of the other sensors that need to stay on. They have an adhesive,
Mhm.
um, and I should mention that that's how we did it in our lab, but every lab is a little different. Every lab does things a little bit differently. And as long as it gets the job done, I think it does. I think those differences are negligible.
Right, right. Okay. I
So, but
didn't
no
mean to take
needles.
you off track, but I wanted to
Nope.
clarify. No needles.
No, it's great. And I've had folks in clinic where I'm getting ready to listen to their heart and lungs, and they're like having whoever's with them step out, and I'm like, you're keeping everything on. So yes, that makes sense. Like we would to no needles, and you sleep in your regular um, pajamas. You take your medicine as usual when you go for your sleep test. A lot of people are like, "Well, can I have a sleeping pill?" Well, if your doctor prescribes one, sure, but then is your breathing problem from the pill or because you already had a breathing problem?
Right.
So, anyway,
Okay.
so on the clinic side,
Mhm.
um, It's very much like a regular doctor's office. So we had our sleep physician who would see patients. We had a physician assistant and myself, a nurse practitioner, seeing patients. And so that's the basic model of consultation. So we meet you for the first time. We go through all of the things. We had a sleep questionnaire, which is very detailed, that we'd go through with everyone. And it was really helpful to have that data ahead of time so we could go, this is what they're talking about. And so if I needed to do some research or chat with the doc, I could, I'd have that a little bit ahead of time.
Right.
So sleep consult is usually the place where I would order initial sleep testing. If somebody was already on CPAP or somebody had sleep apnea, was already being treated, we could use that time to evaluate, how's that therapy going? What do you need to get going? And then our follow-up visits were either to go over sleep test results or to do that additional management. Now we did see some restless leg, which interestingly enough, if you have sleep apnea and it's not treated and you have restless leg too, starting with the sleep apnea does tend to help with the restless leg. Saw a little bit of narcolepsy, not as much as you would expect, because at least in my area, it was mostly sleep apnea. And so a lot of people, we just fixed the sleep apnea, the symptoms of quote unquote narcolepsy would go away, because
Mhm.
sleep apnea, as we're going to find out in a little bit, it can look and behave like a lot of other things,
Right.
like some different mood disorders it can have impacts on, and attention and focus and that sort of thing.
Right. Wow, wonderful. So so how about we do this? I know you've got a beautiful presentation that explains this in much more detail. So how about we go into that, we talk about that, and then when we finish the presentation, we can talk about what you're doing today.
I love it. I love it. That sounds great.
Great. So you
Okay.
should be able to share your screen if I've set it up correctly.
Okay. Here we go. All
Oh,
right. So, in this little presentation, we are going to talk about a few of the basics of sleep apnea. And so it's easy to assume that everybody knows what you're talking about when it comes to medical conditions, right?
mhm.
When you're in it all the time, like you just know the vocabulary already. But a lot of times people have no idea what we're talking about when we're throwing some of these words around. So the first little activity I have is, if you want to feel what it feels like to have an apneic event, which is an event where you're not breathing,
Mhm.
then you can follow along with this activity. Again, you're sleeping when this is happening, but the basic premise is, if you pinch your nose, like you see our little guy here on the screen, and you
Yeah.
try to breathe in through your nose, like that does not feel good, right? It's
No, it does
hard to
not.
breathe in, right? So that is the basis of what's happening when somebody's having apnea, except it's not the nose that's blocked off, it's in the throat. And, for just like a couple of breaths trying to get it in with your nose blocked, that feels really uncomfortable. For us to count it as an apnea or period of not breathing, it needs to last at least 10 seconds.
Mhm.
And the oxygen needs to go down at least 3 or 4%. Sometimes it can go down even more. Um, so that is, and it happens over and over and over again at night. And so a lot of people, they'll say, well, this is like, I sleep fine, I don't have a problem. Well, if you have this, you definitely have a problem, it's a health problem, even if it's not a sleep problem. Um, so uh, and that's why I love talking about sleep apnea, because a lot of people, because it happens in sleep, they just, it's not on their radar. They,
Mhm.
I feel fine. Why would I bother doing this? It's such a hassle.
Right.
So, all right. So when we go for sleep testing, a lot of times this is what we end up with for the meat of the report. This kind of a setup for a report is the part that I like. Like, a lot of people, they get a sleep test, they get a report, and it's all words and you can't see it. I like this because this helps us to put data with the story. So we
Mhm.
get the story when we chat with you, and then we're able to put data with it. And so we're going to go through this in a little more detail as we get going, but this individual did have sleep apnea. Their age, I was 34. And by the time we're done today, you are going to know what that means.
Good, because I
Um,
was going to ask.
you're going to know what that means exactly. And then if you look at one of those reports and you see SpO2 nadir, you're like, I don't know what that means either. You're going to know what that means as well. But basically, this person, these sets of graphs and numbers and whatnot, this is telling us that this individual has severe sleep apnea and they have low oxygen going with it. So
Wow.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
Quiz question, and your
Uh-oh.
audience can follow along.
Uh-oh.
So, which of the following statements regarding sleep apnea or sleep ability rules out the concern for sleep apnea? So we have A, I can't sleep. B, I can't sleep enough. C, I sleep fine. D, none of the above. So which of these, if I hear it as a healthcare provider, which of these would I hear and go, oh, they're probably fine? What do we
Hmm.
think? What do we think? Well,
Well,
I will tell you that it doesn't matter. It could be any of these.
ah,
Any of these. You can have any of these. You can sleep fine. You can be somebody who can't sleep enough, which are the people who, you're at the doctor's office in the waiting room and they're just falling asleep in the chair. Or they're the folks who can't sleep and I haven't slept in days, or at least it feels like I haven't slept in days.
right.
So if you have a pulse and an airway, you technically have risk for having sleep apnea, whether it's creeped into your consciousness at this point or not.
Wow.
So there are three types of things that people tend to experience when they have sleep apnea, and I've seen people in more than one of these categories. So we have I can't sleep. These are the people where any little thing will wake them up, and so for those folks, they wake up super easy, and so their sleep apnea might not look that bad. So a lot of people are like, "Well, it's not that bad." Well, you can't sleep, so you're not giving enough time for it to look that bad. And then we have the folks who are, I can't sleep enough. And those are the ones where like a bomb could be going off next to their head and, they're not going to wake up.
Hmm.
And so they can have really, really long periods where they're not even, where they're not breathing. And they can have really bad periods where the oxygen is dropping because their brain is just not waking them up so that they can breathe. And
Mm.
then the last group is the I sleep fine folks. And the general story with the I sleep fine folks is it tends to be like cardiology sent them or neurology sent them. We've had a few people where the eye doctor sent them. You'll see why that is in a
Mm.
minute. But they go, I sleep fine. This is dumb. Why am I here?
Oh,
Because of that perception that we think that if you have sleep apnea, you have to feel like you have a sleep problem when in fact it is a 24-hour health problem. And sleep apnea can make the heart grumpy. I like to call it grumpy.
hmm.
Grumpy in the sense that your heart is a muscle. It doesn't like going without oxygen. And when it is forced to do that, when it's forced to go into like a fight or flight sort of state, then that is where we can see the what we call arrhythmias or irregular abnormal heartbeats. You need enough time in between the heartbeats for the heart to fill up with blood so then it can push the blood out. But in a lot of these arrhythmias, things like atrial fibrillation, and there's a few other ones, it's that mechanism is not working right. And
Hmm.
so you can feel the symptoms from the heart problem, but still be like, I sleep fine.
Right.
So that is a legit thing.
Can we go back to that slide for 1 second? So one
Sure.
question for you for clarification. In the title, you have OSA for obstructive sleep apnea. So can
Mm-hmm.
you just tell us real quick, what is the difference between obstructive sleep apnea and sleep apnea? Or is there a difference?
So we often will say sleep apnea in reference to obstructive sleep apnea because obstructive is the most common version of sleep apnea. But
Uh-huh.
there are some other subtypes that are a little more complicated, and we will get to those. One of them is central sleep apnea. And the other big one that we see is something called central sleep apnea with Cheyne-Stokes respirations. And so they both have central sleep apnea in them, but as we will talk about in a little bit, they actually come at it from different angles.
Ah, okay.
Um,
Got it.
so, and this word here on this slide, endotypes, that is just the type of sleep apnea that we're seeing, like symptom wise. And it's a more popular term for how we group people by symptoms or by their presentation.
Great, great. Thanks.
So, are we ready for another activity?
Okay.
Because I'm ready.
All
All right.
right.
So, um, I developed this activity and I use it when I'm talking to healthcare providers as far as a way where you can start to see the signs and symptoms of sleep apnea just by looking. And that doesn't mean that they have it, that just means that you're more aware of these are some of the features that we want to be aware of. So if you or anybody in the audience wants to take part, I usually do it with my cell phone. You could
Mm-hmm.
do it with a mirror. But what we'll do is we'll take a couple of pictures. So I call this the selfie assessment because you have your phone, you put it on the selfie mode with the camera, and then you take some pictures. So the first picture we would take is eyes closed or open if you want, but it's easier with them closed,
Mm-hmm.
face forward. So phone like this. Okay, you do that one. And then we do our mouth open, like that. And that one, sometimes you need a light or the bathroom mirror.
Okay.
And then we do this one from the side. Okay. And so as we go, we'll refer back to these pictures. So you can go, haha, I have this, or I don't have that. So when I first meet someone, whether I'm in the clinic, sometimes it happens in my mind in other scenarios. But when I first meet someone, I can go through what I like to call the doorway exam. And these are those risk factors that you can see potentially from the doorway. And Master Yoda here is helping us out today. He's generously volunteered. So the first thing I always look for is something called ptosis. It's ptosis, ptosis. The P is silent. And basically, what that is that's the saggy eyelids. So if we have this saggy eyelids, and some people, their saggy eyelids are so saggy that they start to not be able to see because their eyelids are getting in the way.
Wow.
This is called floppy eyelid syndrome. And 90% of the people who have floppy eyelid syndrome also have sleep apnea. It's so common that if you see this finding, whether it's in yourself or someone around you, it's highly likely that they have it. The
Wow.
next thing we look at is something called rhinophyma, and rhino meaning nose. And Master Yoda does not have rhinophyma, but we look at the nose anyway. And so that is our bulbous, enlarged, usually red nose. We can see this in one of some of the versions of rosacea, which is a skin condition. People who consume alcohol heavily also can develop this, but you don't have to. Both of those things go with sleep apnea, as does rhinophyma by itself. So that is another risk factor that you can see from the doorway. Now, back when we were all wearing masks, you'd never know what you would find under the mask.
Right.
But that's another one that it's kind of sneaky, but you can see it if you're paying attention. And then the
Great.
last one we have is retrognathia, micrognathia. Retro meaning backwards, micro meaning small. So basically, do we have a small or backwards sitting jaw? Because the jaw is the box that the tongue lives in. And so if your box is very small, well, you might have a regular sized tongue, but if it lives in a small box, it's going to take up a lot more room. And then you're not going to have that space for the air to get through. And so overflow for tongue means it's going to end up more in the back of your throat than in the front where it needs to be hanging out.
Hmm.
So does that
So
make sense?
it does, and I'm totally curious because with all these words that you're introducing to us, was the original sleep doctor a comedian who came up with these words because you can't even pronounce them?
Yeah. I don't like to use big medical words if I don't have to. And this presentation originally was for medical people.
Hmm.
So when I'm talking to patients, I'm saggy eyelid, big bulbous nose, small jaw,
Right.
is those are the words that I use. But if you see, if you happen to get a hold of, let's say, your own sleep consult or your sleep test or whatever, and it has these words in it, then you'll go, haha, I know what they mean. But yes, I do try to actively avoid using medical words that I don't actually have to. Thank you for calling me out on that, Andrew.
Well, no, it's just funny because the words, polysomnography and I can't even say it, retrognathia.
Nathia. Yep.
Yeah, they're just hard words to say.
They are. They are. They are indeed. And I, a long time ago, I realized that it does me no benefit to use large words unless I know that the folks I'm talking with are already well versed in those words.
Right,
Because it doesn't make me feel any better to have to go, it means small jaw. So I usually just lead with that.
right, right.
All right. So the other half of the bang assessment is other things that you should most likely be able to just kind of glean from the doorway. Um, and yes, we have a little bit more medical words, mostly
Okay.
just BMI. So this is the bang risk assessment, BANG. And I'm not getting
Okay.
into any kind of gender issue things. We're just going basics on this.
Hmm.
But so BMI over 35. So basically, if you have extra weight on you, if you have more insulation, then that is a risk factor for sleep apnea. Age over 50, in guys, a lot of times, if they're over 40, I'm like, what's going on here? Neck circumference. So we're looking here for how large our neck is. We're not down here at the collar area. We want to
Hmm.
get any extra meat the person has. But in guys, over 17 inches is a risk factor for sleep apnea, and in ladies, over 16 inches.
So
So
wait,
if you have somebody who has like head and then shoulders but no neck, then like right away that they have that risk.
just out of curiosity. So when you're talking about obstructive sleep apnea, and you're talking about how like the tongue can kind of block the airway when you're sleeping or something, it seems counterintuitive to me. If you had a bigger neck, wouldn't that mean you have more room?
You would think. However, the bigger it is on the outside, the smaller it is on the inside, which
Huh.
is the same for our folks who have something called cardiomyopathy. It's an enlargement of the heart.
Hmm.
The left ventricle is the part of the heart that is responsible for pumping the blood through the body. And we're all freaked out about, you got to have your blood pressure under control. It's bad for your heart. Why is it bad for your heart? Because if the heart has to pump too hard, the muscle gets big, and then there's not enough room for the blood to hang out in the cup that is the pump of that part of the heart.
Wow.
So bigger on the outside means less room on the inside,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, great.
And this is also part of how if you have someone who drops a significant amount of body weight, they start to lose fat from a fat deposition from their tongue. They start to lose it from their neck, and then so things as they get smaller on the outside, they get bigger on the inside.
Hmm. Great.
And then next we have gender. Guys more than ladies. Ladies catch up after menopause, is what I like to say, because a lot of ladies have been told, "Oh, well, you can't have sleep apnea. You're not a guy. You don't have a weight problem. You can't have it. Your
Mhm.
neck isn't too big." Well, yeah, you can. Menopause by itself can be a risk factor for sleep apnea, separate from a weight problem. A lot of times it is the way folks are made with their jaw and their throat and stuff. But so more guys than ladies. Ladies catch up after menopause.
Wow.
All right, so we're gonna let that settle for just a little second here, and
Okay.
we're gonna look at two of our selfie pictures. So
Uh,
if you did take your selfie pictures, this would be the part where I would challenge you to go ahead and look at them, or if you want to pause the video and go look in the mirror, the things you would be looking for are the droopy eyelids, ptosis, so you'd see it here and possibly even here.
mhm.
How's your nose looking? Big and bulbous, or is it normal? How's your jaw? Is it small and recessed? So Kitty kind of has, I think, a little recessed jaw, but that's
Yeah,
just the way cats are made.
right.
And sometimes you can't tell this until you have someone open their mouth. So you might be like, well, it looks fine. But when you actually go to open wide, which is going to be later, you can go, huh, it is kind of squishy in there, and narrow. And then BMI, which is our extra weight thing. How old do you look? Not how old are you actually, but how old do you look? Your neck, and then that gender piece, because most of us, we have features consistent with our gender.
Hmm.
So that's part one of the selfie assessment. Now,
Okay.
just using your eyeballs, you can only get so far. And so this is where we need to start pulling out the story. And you know your own story better than anyone. But this is where our STOP screening comes in. And STOP stands for snoring, tired, observed apneas, and high blood pressure. So 2 out of 4 with just these 4 STOP questions would be increased risk for sleep apnea. 4 out of 8, if we combine the bang and the stop together, that would be, or sorry, 3 out of 8 bang and stop together would be an increased risk of sleep apnea.
Hmm.
So if you have 6 out of 8, it's a moderate, what we call pretest probability of having, or a significant probability of having sleep apnea. It's like 75% of people who have 6 out of 8 of the stop and the bang, they do have sleep apnea.
Wow.
So snoring, if people are saying things like, could you please wait to go to sleep until I go to sleep because it's way too loud and I just can't sleep? Or where's the bear in the house because it's so loud? The windows are rattling. That's not just snoring. Like that is risk for sleep apnea. If it's, I got a cold, my nose is stuffy, and I'm snoring and it's like barely audible, fine. But if people have said something about it, then I would call it a risk factor. Tired or fatigued, again, you don't have to be falling asleep everywhere to be tired. Observed apneas, and some people, you sleep alone. How are you going to know? So, sometimes we'll say, are you waking up feeling short of breath or waking up gasping? Or do you have a pet that likes to come in and like put their hand on you and try to wake you up? And you're like, why are you doing that? It may be because you're not breathing correctly and your animal knows it.
Hmm.
Sometimes. And then high blood pressure. And this is whether the blood pressure is being adequately, or whether the blood pressure is cooperating with treatment or not. So, especially folks who are on multiple blood pressure medications, 2, 3, 4, or more blood pressure medications, we do start to wonder what's going on with that. Why is this happening? Could sleep apnea be a piece of it?
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
so, and because sleep apnea is a 24-hour health problem, there are clues kind of all over when we look at a person's medical record. And you don't have to have all of these, but I put this slide in here just to illustrate how sleep apnea is kind of like that puppet master. It's got its grubby little fingers into everything,
Yeah.
or nearly everything. So it doesn't do nice things for your heart, your brain, your lungs, your kidneys, uh, the endocrine system. That's where diabetes and thyroid hang out. So we can see risk factors in other conditions a person may have.
Hmm.
A lot of times we see clues in somebody's medication. So we have medications that people take to help them sleep because I can't sleep. They don't know it's
Right.
because they can't breathe necessarily. We have stimulants. ADD, ADHD has ties to sleep apnea, and there are some folks who are on stimulants because of how tired their untreated or suboptimally treated sleep apnea is making them feel. We have our blood pressure medicines, our diabetes medicines, because those diabetes and sleep apnea have links.
Hmm.
Psychotropics, that's all of the kind of antidepressant, antipsychotic, the medications that do things with our brains.
Hmm.
And then narcotics. Narcotics are very interesting because they have the ability to slow down how fast we breathe, which then puts us at risk for central sleep apnea, which again we'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
Sleep
Wait.
apnea
Question.
runs, yeah,
Question about the medications.
yeah.
So are you saying that someone with obstructive sleep apnea may end up using these types of meds, or these types of meds may cause obstructive sleep apnea? What's the link between the medications and the sleep
It
apnea?
varies. It varies. So the blood pressure meds and the diabetes meds, the link there is high blood pressure and sleep apnea go together.
Okay.
Diabetes and sleep apnea, they kind of play off of each other. Um, they can play off of each other. We know that sleep apnea and mood disturbance and mental health problems is
Mhm.
huge, and especially if you are seeing professionals to help you with your mental health stuff and it's not getting better and you're not sleeping like you should or you feel like you should. So it's again that link between the narcotics. I think are the only ones on this list. Narcotics and the sleeping type pills. These are the ones that can either give opportunity for the sleep apnea to be worse or for us to start to see it more. So remember how we talked about initially, we have the I can't sleep people, and part of
Mhm.
why they can't sleep in this setting of sleep apnea is because every little thing wakes them up. Like the cat farts and they're awake.
Wow.
So they take medicine to help them sleep, then their brain is not going to wake them up so they can breathe, and so we can see this more significantly.
Hmm. Okay.
And then the narcotics with that slowing down of respiratory drive, that's a big one there. Though narcotics also have some implications with insomnia. So some folks, they'll take these kinds of medications and they'll go, I cannot sleep. Whew. So and that can be one of the risks that goes along with that.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Fascinating, isn't it?
It is. It is. To me, it is.
I love it. All right. So sleep apnea does tend to run in families. So mom had it, dad had it, sister has it, brother has it, kid has it. Um, if people in your family have it, then your risk of having it is increased as well. I think it's like a 20 or 30% increase of having it. And that's because you share architecture. So the way you're made, you share with the people who you share your biology with,
Mhm.
in that first degree sense. So, and I've treated and helped to take care of 3 generations in the same family because they're all made the same,
Right.
or very similarly. Alcohol, cannabis, and drugs. And some of this is that it can bring out the breathing issue. Some of this is we're trying to self treat because we can't sleep. And there's other issues that can go along with these guys. And then down here, sorry, more medical words. History of tonsillectomy and adenoidectomy. That's TNA.
Mhm.
UPPP is a surgery we don't really do anymore if we can help it, and that's called uvulopalatopharyngoplasty, and that is your uvula, which is that punching bag dangly thing in the back of your throat. They used to trim this guy off, in and thinking that that would help with sleep apnea.
Hmm.
It's only one spot that the sleep apnea happens. The other spot is the back of the tongue. And so
Right.
that only helps the one spot. So it can help with snoring. I have had a couple of people who've gone for it. The recovery on it is not something that is very comfortable at all. It was pretty brutal, even with some pretty good pain management on board. So for this one, for somebody to go for that these days would be, um, they'd have to be very carefully weighing the risks versus the benefits for both the patient and just the healthcare team in general. And then we
Hmm.
have bariatric surgery or weight loss surgery. We know that losing weight can help with obstructive sleep apnea for a lot of people. But we also know that sometimes folks have gone for the surgery, they've dropped a bunch of weight, they've thought, I don't snore anymore, I'm cured. And they stop therapy. And then 5, 10 years later, the weight is back, the snoring is back, and then we're kind of back to
Right.
where we were before.
Right. Wow.
All right. Sleep apnea has a lot of associated conditions. I'm not really going to go through this slide too terribly much, but some of these should jump out at you. We have restless leg syndrome. WED is the other name for it, Willis-Ekbom disease. Leg cramps is a big one. Anxiety, depression, PTSD,
Mhm.
because there's some nightmare stuff that can go with sleep apnea, which is not going to help your PTSD.
Right.
Um, our ADHD, dementia, erectile dysfunction. The joke there is that sleep apnea does like to hit below the belt.
Hmm.
Let's see, we talked about floppy eyelid. OHS is obesity, hypoventilation syndrome, heart failure. So it does really affect everywhere.
Wow.
All right, so the next part of the assessment is the oral airway exam. And basically, this is where we open our mouth and see how far back can we see. So this is what's called a Mallampati exam. And so basically, you open your mouth and see how far back you can see. So level 1 or grade 1, class 1, you can see everything the whole way back. 2, you can see almost everything. 3, can't really see very much. And 4, all you can see is tongue. So our 3s and our 4s, that means there is not a lot of room for that tongue in the box that is called the mouth and the jaw. The other thing we're looking at is, are the sides of the tongue, are they bumpy or do they have ridges? And these are called tongue crenations.
Hmm.
And this means that the tongue is literally filling in the gaps between the teeth because it doesn't have enough room.
Wow.
So the 3, the 4, and those tongue crenations, that can certainly, that's another risk factor that we look for. So if you're playing along with our selfie assessment, this will be the part where you would look at your mouth, look at your throat, and go, okay, am I a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4 on Mallampati? What's the sides of my tongue doing? Are they crinkly, or are they more smooth? And then I have teeth on here, but this really, the teeth is most important when we're looking at treatment options, because a lot of folks end up with a CPAP mask and they have no teeth, and then they have mask problems, and it's a nightmare. And so knowing, at least if you're looking at someone else, what's the deal with their teeth, can be super helpful. There are also some treatment options that require you to have teeth in order for them to even be an option.
Right.
So that's why that's there. Does that make
Right.
sense?
It absolutely does.
All right, so let's get on to the short version of what happens when you're not breathing right when you're sleeping. Um, and the most obvious one is something called hypoxemia. Basically, this is the medical word for your oxygen goes low.
Okay.
Um, so oxygen goes low, and think about it. So you're blocked off here. You're using all this to breathe. Your oxygen's going down, and your body basically it enters panic mode. Um, and so it's not fun. And your heart rate's getting higher, you're sweating, super not fun. And so you're ending up with what I like to call a workout to nowhere, because you're burning a lot of calories just to stay alive. Now, one of the
Hmm.
things that happens when the oxygen goes down, and people don't realize that this happens when the oxygen goes down, but the blood vessels in the lungs squeeze up. The blood vessels so the right side of the heart is the part that gets blood and is responsible for putting the blood through the lungs. The left side is the part that's responsible for getting the blood to the rest of the body.
Okay.
So the right side of the heart does not like to work very hard. It likes a nice, easy, steady pace. And so when those blood vessels squeeze up, it makes the right side of the heart work harder. You can have shortness of breath, and that shortness of breath can last into the next day. So you can be
Hmm.
like, oh, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Why am I sucking air here? It can be from that. So people don't realize that. And if we prevent the oxygen from going down, then those blood vessels can completely relax, and then we can see some improvements of shortness of breath, assuming that that's the only reason for the shortness of breath. Nightmares is a thing because, when we get into REM sleep, then this is my theory, and I think it does hold water. But when we get into REM sleep, our brain creates the dream environment, and it incorporates things a lot of times that are happening in our environment or with our body into that dream content, whether we're like processing memories to try and, sort things out. So if you're not breathing and your body's in fight or flight panic mode, your brain's going to pick a story that makes sense with what you're feeling. And so a lot of times we'll have folks who have terrible nightmares. Um, and once they're breathing like they should, they stop. This
Wow.
is not the same for somebody who has like full blown PTSD. That's a different thing. But for a lot of folks, just keeping them breathing is super helpful. And so our body really wants the oxygen to stay in the plane. So stop dropping, stay
Right.
in the plane.
Wow.
Now, you would think that having the oxygen come back up would be amazing. However, when it goes up and down, up and down, and up and down, and up and down, that's hard on our plumbing. It can mess with the very smallest of blood vessels that we have. It can contribute to our body having high blood pressure. That's this systemic hypertension thing.
Hmm.
And it can help to actually clog up some of our blood vessels. This is called oxidative stress. So we actually have little muscles inside of our blood vessels. Um, and so it's hard on all of our circulation and our plumbing. So we do really want to keep that oxygen in that normal range where it's supposed to be. Next up is something called negative intrathoracic pressure. This phenomenon is why a lot of folks who have untreated sleep apnea are up, they feel like, all night long to go to the bathroom. We're blocked off in our throat. We're using all of our chest to breathe. The heart goes, I can't do it. I'm so stressed out. And it does this by sending chemical signals, which I'm not going to bore you with.
Hmm.
But the kidneys go, oh, I hear you, heart. Oh, let's help. We would like to help. So what do the kidneys do? Well, instead of sending fluid back to the heart, because the heart already can't keep up and it's already very grumpy at this point, the
Hmm.
kidneys siphon off the fluid. So then there's not as much in the circulation. Where does that fluid go? It goes to your bladder. So then you have to get up and go to the bathroom.
Mm.
So that is your kidneys just trying to help. I'm just trying to help, I promise.
Wow.
Is what they're saying. And then the last piece that we're going to go over is the central nervous system arousal. So this is that sleep or breathe kind of thing. And so if you're trying, like, we're not really good multitaskers. I don't know how you work it with some of your clients who are trying to, do 18 things at once, but our brains don't like having to do that either. Like,
Right.
we just want to sleep and then we want to be awake. We don't want to be sleep or breathe, continuing to switch gears. And
Right.
so what we see here, this is a hypnogram, which is the brainwave patterns from a person who had a sleep study. So here's awake, REM sleep. Stage 1 sleep is transition sleep, so it doesn't really feel like sleep, but it counts. And then stage 2 sleep, which is intermediate sleep. And you could see this person is awake, asleep, awake, asleep, awake, asleep, awake, asleep, and it just keeps on going. So we can have um, that's what we call sleep fragmentation. A lot of times you can't see it this well on a sleep study, which is why I pulled this particular one. But sleep fragmentation. So, your brain can't sit there and do one thing really well, which is the sleep stuff that your brain needs to do because it keeps getting distracted
Hmm.
because you got to breathe. And so this is how you can end up with poor quality sleep, memory problems. A lot of folks will have some issues with their memory where they're kind of foggy because their brain isn't able to breathe long enough to hold the sleep. Some folks, they can actually look like they're sleep talking because they've been woken up enough to breathe that then they can talk. Um, and so again, sleep or breathe, we need to be able to do both at the same time. Does that make sense?
It does, but I could have sworn I saw a squirrel.
There was a squirrel because we were trying to not go squirrel. Um, which is a reference to the movie Up that my children and I really like a lot. So, all right. So we went through all of that background stuff, and now let's get into some of the basic definition stuff.
Cool. Cool.
So if you look at a sleep test, you'll see something called AHI or apnea hypopnea index. I call this the sleep apnea number. What's your sleep apnea number? Now, how do we come up with the sleep apnea number? Well, um, on the sleep study, every single time a person isn't breathing, it is marked as either an obstructive apnea, so no air is moving, oxygen's going down, trying hard to breathe, or it's marked as something else, which we're going to go through in a minute. uh, so whatever 50 over 50%, whichever type of event is over 50% of those events, that's the overall kind of sleep apnea it's supposed to be. So if 51% of the events are obstructive apneas, then we're going to call it obstructive sleep apnea. If 51% are central apneas, then we're going to call it, or we're supposed to call it central apnea.
Hmm.
So a sleep apnea number of 5 to 15 is mild. 15 to 30 is moderate, above 30 is severe. And I think that's a little bit sneaky because I've had folks who, um, actually, let me back up. So if I have somebody whose sleep apnea number is 60, I'll be like, man, your sleep apnea is double severe. Because and that's just the way that I address it with my folks. Now, It is the number of times per hour of sleep that the person is not breathing right. So HI of 5 means 5 times per hour of sleep you're not breathing right. But because it's per hour, that means if you have one event over an hour, your sleep apnea number would be 1. If you have one event in 1 minute, your sleep apnea number would be 60.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one event that lasts 2 minutes and you have an hour of sleep, your sleep apnea number would be 30. So it's a little bit deception of statistics. And
Oh,
so your really long events, they still only count as one,
I
which is why
see.
Gimli is on this slide because it still only counts as one.
Right. Right.
So there's some debate at this point about maybe we should be looking at a different way of assigning severity of sleep apnea, especially when it's like, oh, my sleep apnea number is only 7. Well, how, like, are these events 15 seconds? Are they 2 minutes? That
Wow.
could make a difference, right? And
Sure.
my winner was like 2 minutes and 14 seconds. He was an instructor and he had volumes of instructional materials memorized and he couldn't figure out like where he was. Like he was getting lost in his teaching stuff. And
Hmm.
so we were like, well, that would explain it. He did very well
Wow.
after treatment, by the way. All right, so we'll go back to
Oh,
um, this is our respiratory events on the hypnogram.
okay.
And so this has the different versions of breathing events. So I figured this would be a good time to go through them. The CA, this is central apnea. So this is where the person is not trying to breathe. There is no air moving and the oxygen is going down.
Okay.
We have our obstructive apnea. So we are trying to breathe. There is no air moving and the oxygen is going down.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have our mixed apneas. That's what that M stands for. And
Okay.
this is where part of it is we are trying to breathe and there's no air moving and oxygen is going down. And the other part of it is we're not trying to breathe. So it's mixed. And it doesn't really matter which came first. Um, these kinds of events, when we're doing that 50% rule, these mixed events, they always go on the obstructive side, not the central side of the equation.
Okay.
And then we have this one, hypo or hypopneas. This is where you're getting a little bit of air through, but the oxygen's going down. It might not go down quite as much as the other ones, but the oxygen is going down and you are usually trying to breathe. And you'll notice, so each of these marks is a different breathing event. And the taller the mark, the longer the breathing event.
Hmm.
And this is part of why we're including hypopneas in that overall sleep apnea number, um, because they can last longer and they can be pretty significant for folks. So
Great.
when we're looking at the different kinds of sleep apnea, we have obstructive sleep apnea. This is the one where we're working hard. So we have that effort, we don't have the airflow. In central sleep apnea, we're hardly working because we don't even have the effort, we don't have the airflow. And then this one is very interesting. This one goes with heart problems usually. And this is central sleep apnea with Cheyne-Stokes respirations. Now you won't see the Cheyne-Stokes respirations on that chart that I just showed you, but you will see the central apneas.
Okay.
So, and this is getting a little bit deeper, but we have a lot of folks who are having, who are coming up, especially in our kind of our older crowd with this version. So I think it is relevant. So Cheyne-Stokes respirations, we're breathing fast, 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 and then it gets slower and slower and slower, and then the breathing stops. That's our central apnea, and then it starts picking up again, and it alternates
Hmm.
in this breathing pattern. So we're somewhere between working hard and hardly working.
Wow.
And so heart failure is the version that that tends to be the risk factor for this particular one.
Great. Wow.
You're going to be such a sleep expert by the time we're done with this,
Yeah, that's our goal here.
Andrew. All right, so this is our oxygen graph. SpO2 stands for pulse oximetry. That's what the data you get off of that finger sensor.
Mm-hmm.
And so this, I'll just go forward here. So this is called the sawtooth pattern. So normal would be over here, it's where it's kind of nice and steady. There's a little bit of variation, but nothing too exciting. But these guys here, this is a sawtooth pattern. So if you Maybe you didn't get a sleep study. Maybe you just had your oxygen checked for some reason, or you have one of those monitors that you can do it yourself. If this is a pattern that you see, that is going to be worth a conversation with your doctor, especially if it's news to you and them. So when we're looking at oxygen, anything 89 and higher, when you're sleeping, is considered normal. When you're awake, we like folks to be in the 90s, mid to upper 90s tends to be a good place. If you have lung disease, lower 90s can be acceptable.
Hmm.
So if we put it all together, you can see here's our worst oxygen events, and here's most of those breathing events. But
Ah,
even here with the hypopneas, you can still see we had some times where that oxygen was going down. So it all kind of
interesting.
lines up.
Wow.
Um, and so this person's sleep apnea number H, I was 34, over 30 severe. And nadir is the word for lowest point. So the lowest the oxygen went, I just did a visual on this, it was between 80 and 82%.
Hmm.
So way below that 89 and higher place where we want folks to be hanging out.
Right.
Now that I said that, you can still have sleep apnea and not have officially low oxygen. It can just be changing within that normal range. So something to be aware of there.
Hmm. Wow.
All right. So there's a lot of people who are like, I am not super excited about going down this road to either treat my sleep apnea or even just get it further investigated. And so I thought we could take a couple of minutes to talk about that if that's all right with you. Are we
I'd
good
love
on
it.
time? Okay.
Absolutely.
So why does sleep apnea remain undiagnosed or underdiagnosed and undertreated? Well, we have like I just didn't know, or I don't want it to be true, therefore it's not going to be true officially. I had somebody
Right.
tell me I don't have sleep apnea. I'm like, you don't have it because you haven't been tested.
Right.
I'm pretty sure you have it. Then we have like I'm not going to be able to tolerate the treatment, so why even bother? This is all new. For if you go for an in-lab sleep study, like it's not your bed. I don't like all this new stuff. And if you do it at home, like there's the stuff you got to wear to do the testing, so that can be new, and we just don't like it. Catastrophic expectations. So going into it, going, I'm going to fail. It's going to be terrible. I spent a lot of time in clinic helping people to kind of give themselves the benefit of the doubt. Like, you have not experienced this yet. It could be terrible, but it could be okay too. And sometimes
Hmm.
folks are very surprised. And then
Hmm.
there's the perceived cost. There are a lot of options now for cash pay. They're not super expensive if you have like a flexible spending account or a health savings account that you can pull from, or if you've saved up some money to be able to do it.
Right.
But there is some cost involved. And looking at like kind of figuring out, um, I have this picture on here because I remember being a kid and like onions were the worst thing. Don't make me eat onions. Oh, blah, blah. And now that I actually have tried them, they're okay. And it's kind of like that. Like you don't know it until you don't know how it's going to be until you try it. So top testing concerns, I won't sleep, I can't sleep. Because I can't sleep, it's not going to be accurate, so why do it? I will tell you that a yes answer is still a yes answer, even if it's a crappy night of sleep.
Right.
People feel really weird about, oh well, that technician's going to be watching me while I'm sleeping. I'm like, you know what, that technician is used to people snoring and farting all night. Like there's hardly anything you're going to do that's going to like raise their eyebrow. Like they're
Hmm.
mostly looking like, oh, they're asleep, oh, here's a breathing event. And they're usually pretty busy overnight. We have the folks who are like, but I don't fall asleep until 4 in the morning, so like how am I going to come at 8:30 at night and you want me to sleep? Or I got to have the TV on to sleep, or I'm claustrophobic, I can't wear a mask. And I would say there are varying degrees of claustrophobia. So if you can't get into a shower because it's too enclosing, or you can't ride in a car or an elevator, like that's pretty legit. If you're just like, I need a fan on me so I can feel like there's air, there is still hope to get it treated. Um, if there might need to be a mask in someone's future.
Okay.
So in-lab sleep testing, first off, there's multiple treatment options or testing options that are available. A lot of times we need at least 1 or 2 hours of sleep to be able to establish a sleep apnea diagnosis. So we don't need all night. It doesn't need to be good sleep. It doesn't need to be perfect sleep. we take good enough. Um, so, and we count the sleep by the brain waves. We don't count it by what you think you slept, which I think is really encouraging because some of the stages of sleep, they don't feel like sleep.
Mhm.
But we do still count them. So that is an important point. It's pretty rare for somebody to not sleep at all on the night of a test. It does happen, but it's incredibly rare. It's so rare that in our clinic, we usually would not prescribe or ask a primary care doctor to prescribe a sleep aid for a patient unless we'd already tried to study them and they were just laying there awake all night. And it did not happen, I don't know, in my patient group, maybe twice a year um, would be at max, like how often we'd see something like that. And some years we didn't have anybody who had that as an issue.
Hmm.
You can sleep in any position that you're comfortable. If you usually sleep prone, which is face down, go for it, is what I would say, because I want to know what's your breathing like when you're in that position. So a
Right.
lot of people are like, well, I'll have to sleep on my back all night and I don't, and it's going to be terrible. Yeah, they may ask you to sleep on your back for some of the time because we need to know, does the don't sleep on your back option, could that be an option for you? If we don't have the data, we have no idea. And so part of the reason the sleep technician is there is so if something falls off, they can go in and put it back on and, you guys can continue on with the night. Some folks feel very self-conscious about I'm hooked up to all this stuff. And what if I have to go to the bathroom? Kind of like when you get a small kid ready to go outside in the snow and they've got all the snow clothes on. Not for us, man. All those wires get put into a box. The box gets connected to the wall. So if you got to get up, you just let them know, and they'll unhook your box from the wall, and you are free to go and use the bathroom and anything else you need like that. We would have a night light or the bathroom light could be on, but TV, phone, music, not okay, at least for our lab. And the reason is it could cause interference with the sensors, number one.
Mhm.
Number two, one of the things we look at is all the things that are making the person wake up. That's the arousals. So is it your breathing waking you up? Is it leg twitching waking you up? Or is it pain waking you up? Pain would be in that spontaneous arousal bucket, but anything you hear can also wake you up. So even if it's a movie that you've watched a million gazillion times and it's always the one that you play when you go to sleep at night, it can still be enough to distract your brain and keep you from sleeping as well as you should. So they kind of try to encourage um, um, less things in the environment to disturb the sleep, because we really want to boil out or pull out what's the breathing, what's movement, and what's everything else for waking people up. Now, there's a lot of home tests that are available, and you'll see these advertised in different places online. The most common types of tests are the type 3 and type 4. Type 2 test is basically it's the in-lab test, but it's done at home. So it's got all the bells and whistles on it. It's also the most expensive one. The type 2, type 3, and type 4 are the ones that you're going to come across more often. And they come in different versions. So some have nasal, like cannula type deals and a belt around the chest. Some it's a bracelet with a thing for your finger and a sticker for the chest. Some it's just a little finger thingy.
Mhm.
There's a ring one, like there's a ton of them. There's a patch one. So there's lots of different options available out there. Um, they are held to a higher standard than like your personal health monitors. So it's a higher standard than your Fitbit. I'm using an Aura ring here at the moment. It's a higher standard than that the FDA makes these companies go through to be able to be diagnostic instead of just for personal use. Um, so some people are like, yes, sign me up for that home test.
Right.
um, I don't want to have to go into the lab. That's great, but sometimes you just can't avoid going into the lab. There may be reasons where you would need to go into the lab, but it is nice to have that as an option. And a lot of labs now are offering this kind of testing so that they can reserve those beds for the people who actually need to be in the lab. So, all right, We are coming into the home stretch here, Andrew.
Okay.
Does this shoe look comfortable to you? Do these shoes look comfy?
I don't think I'd be comfortable in that.
I don't think I would be either. That just looks like I'm about to break my neck. And a lot of times when people hear CPAP or hear the mask, they feel about the mask the same way I feel about these shoes. It is not freaking going to happen, right? That looks so uncomfortable. It's just going to be terrible. And so while CPAP, which is the mask-based therapy, CPAP stands for continuous positive airway pressure. So we use air delivered with some sort of a mask. We use air to hold open the throat. That's
Mhm.
basically what we're doing.
Okay.
But it's not for everyone. And I think we're at a very interesting time in the world of healthcare and sleep medicine where we can say that, yeah, CPAP is a great option, but we also understand that it's not a universal option. And so we have actually lots of options that are available. We have our positive airway pressure options. That's where we're adding air. CPAP is the one most of us are familiar with. That's the mask.
Hmm.
We have nasal EPAP. That's a set of devices that actually restricts the movement of air out of the nose. Like air can go in, but it can't get out as quickly, and that's to hold air in the throat. We have a couple of options for that. Um, we have negative airway pressure. So that's where we're actually pulling air out of the front of the mouth to pull the tongue forward so then there's more room.
Hmm.
What else? Weight loss. For every 10% decrease in body weight, generally, we expect to see a 26% decrease in how bad the sleep apnea is. So
Wow.
you can do that the old fashioned way. You can do that with bariatric surgery for folks who are candidates.
Hmm.
There's no free lunch. So, I mean, everything has risks, including surgery. There's positional therapy. So that's the stay off your back option. You can't do that if you still have a lot of breathing issue when you're on your sides or you're on your belly.
Sure.
We have oral appliance. So that moves, this is one where you need to have teeth to hook it to. And so that moves your jaw forward like this when you're sleeping. Um, Sleep dentistry is the folks that manage and fabricate these guys.
Hmm.
Neuromuscular electrical stimulation. This is the Inspire device that everyone's talking about. The FDA recently opened up the criteria for who could be a candidate for that device. You have to have obstructive sleep apnea, so less than 50% of the apneas could be central.
Hmm.
Um, you have to have the right BMI, and what was the other thing? Right kind of sleep apnea. I think the BMI max now is 40. It used to be 32. So I would tell a lot of people, I'm sorry, but right now you're not a candidate based on the BMI. But it's been opened up now for a lot more people. Oh, and then the third criteria is not being able to use or benefit from CPAP therapy.
Hmm.
So if you're like, oh, that mask, it's I have all these reasons why it's just not working, and your doctor agrees with you, that could be a potential option. And then we have some surgical options. You know what? I just screwed up, but it's okay. Everything I just said about this one is actually this one, the hypoglossal nerve stimulator. My
Ah,
bad. So sorry.
okay.
This one is Inspire down here. This
Oh.
one is a daytime device, the neuromuscular electrical stimulator. It's a daytime device for primary snoring, mild sleep apnea. You use it 20 minutes a day for like 6 weeks, and then a couple times a week after that. And what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to beef up the tongue muscle. So when it relaxes, it's not going to block off the back of the throat. So
Oh.
my bad
Never
there.
heard of
Yep.
that before.
Yep. So that one's called Inspire. It's supposed to decrease the sleep apnea and how much the oxygen is going down by 50%. They have they have some studies in the works that I don't think have been published yet, looking at moderate and severe sleep apnea and some other dosing protocols
Hmm.
for that. So that's exciting. That's a daytime one. And so this one here, UPPP, these are ear, nose, and throat surgical treatments. So trim off the uvula,
Hmm.
TNA, trim off the tonsils and adenoids if they're there. MMA is maxillomandibular advancement. you're not going to get this unless like you were in a car accident and your face got smashed up. But basically it's used to pull the the jaw and the maxilla forward. So if everything is smushed back, it can pull it forward.
Mhm.
And then the last one is tracheostomy, which we don't really do that for this. But if you have a tracheostomy, that's where you breathe through an added hole in the neck.
Mhm.
Um, it's bypassing up here where the obstruction happens.
Ah,
So if you
makes
have one of
sense.
these, you obstructive sleep apnea is not going to be an issue as long as this guy here is staying open.
Right, right.
So some mask-free options. This is not the complete list, but we have a couple of resources here on mask-free options. Nasal EPAP, one of them is Bongo. There's another one out there as well, but I cannot remember the name.
Mhm.
Intermittent negative airway pressure, that's INAP. That's the one that pulls the air out of the front of the mouth. Um, the Excite device is the daytime device, and then the hypoglossal nerve stimulator is the Inspire.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, so there are a lot of options, and a lot of people they aren't even aware that they could be an option. I will say if insurance is paying for the treatment for sleep apnea, we start with CPAP. If it can't work or there's some reason where it would be a dumb idea to try it, then a lot of times insurance is agreeable for us to go to an additional option or an alternative option. Some of these are cash pay, not covered by insurance. So the nasal EPAP isn't always covered, I don't think, and some of the others aren't either. Inspire is covered.
mhm.
Um, if it's part of the plan.
Right.
Um,
Well, it's good that there's
so
so many options. That's great.
yeah, and it's exciting for sure. So I figure we just wrap it up now with this presentation at least. So
Mhm.
again, we can see the signs and symptoms of sleep apnea from the doorway if we know what we're observing and what it means what we're observing.
Mhm.
Um, and so hopefully through this presentation, you've been able to see how to connect those dots. I find as a healthcare provider, if I am trying to coordinate care, I have a concern that I need another healthcare provider to address because it's not my thing to do, then I have to be very explicit in what my concern is.
Mhm.
So my brain has done the thinking, and so I'll make sure that, this is exactly what I'm worried about here, and that's how I start to connect the dots in that kind of a scenario. And so if you or someone in the audience is like, yeah, I think I have da 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 da, helping your healthcare team connect the dots can help you to have a much better experience than if you wait for them to try and figure it out themselves.
Mhm.
So we have our symptoms to the diagnosis or the potential diagnosis. Then we connect our diagnosis to what our treatment options are. Treatment options and possible benefits. You don't know how treating the sleep apnea is going to help until you've done it and you see what's left over. And then you try it. And then, are we successful or do we need to go another round of, either adjusting things or trying something else? And we all want to feel heard, and so hopefully, now you are armed with the information to be able to, anticipate concerns like, oh, right, I don't have to sleep great, and to be able to make some informed decisions there. So I have included resources if you also desire to do some nerdy reading.
Mhm.
And then if you'd like to get in touch with me, I guess now's as good of a time as any to say what I'm up to these days.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
so, so for healthcare providers, I have the Sleep NP. I do healthcare lectures, kind of like the one that you all just sat through.
Mhm.
And I am working on starting my Maine-based sleep clinic called Hello Sleep Health. And you can get in touch with me at connect@hellosleephealth.com. We have our website, hellosleephealth.com, as well. And so that's the place for patients. And I think we'll have some educational resources either there or on the Sleep NP. So I'm super excited because I really do love this. And I think that like I said, I think we're at a very exciting time where we can help a lot more people breathe better when they're sleeping and see how much better they can do from there.
Right, right. Well, let me ask just for clarification, the sleep clinic that you are setting up, what exactly are you doing there? What would people expect to be able to get from that?
Yeah, so my idea is to do direct specialty care, which is where we just do the sleep stuff. If you have sleep apnea and you need somebody to help manage the CPAP, or you have a driving form that you need filled out and that CPAP piece has to be part of it,
Mm.
that's where we would live. If you've had sleep testing and you were told, oh, you don't have sleep apnea, or it's not bad enough to do anything about, and you'd like to get deeper into what do my results mean? What are my options? Should I get retested? What are my other options for retesting? We're gonna live in that place as well. We will have a little bit to do with restless leg syndrome. Probably not going to do very much with narcolepsy because um, of some of the requirements that go with that. But sleep apnea is the big one. So if you have sleep apnea and you want to feel heard, you want to be part of, you want to feel more like you're part of the management yourself. Feel like you're the expert in your sleep apnea. That's what the clinic is for. We are based in Maine, so if you're not physically in Maine, then we can't service you. But if you
Mhm.
are in Maine, we certainly would be happy to chat at least. So
Wow. Wow. Well, Carissa, that is an amazing presentation. You obviously know your stuff, and I really appreciate the way you were able to explain it. I love the little cat pictures and all because I'm thinking there's a bar trick in there. It's like, let me take a look at you. I bet I can tell whether you have sleep apnea, and just
yep,
looking at
yep,
those things. So
yep,
that's fantastic.
yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Well, so we spent a good amount of time on this. It's been very informative for me. I've learned a lot from you, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I know the audience must have learned as much as I did, if not more. And we appreciate you taking the time. Um, we have a way to get in contact with you. We'll put some info down in the description of the video as well, so people can find the contact information. And hopefully, once you get started and up and running, maybe we can have you back and you can share with us how things are going.
That would be awesome. I would love it.
Great. Well, with that, I'm going to say thank you and I appreciate your time. And we look forward to, like I said, seeing you back in the future.
My pleasure.